Welcome to NT Podcast, Science and Theology Podcast. Today we are diving into one of the most intriguing and controversial topics in the debate between creation and evolution. Why does nature seem to be filled with designs that cause suffering, predation, and even parasitism? If the world was originally created as good, how do we explain the existence of biological systems that appear to be optimized for violence and survival at the expense of other creatures? Joining us to discuss this fascinating subject is Dr. Walter Veith, a zoologist and well-known speaker on creationism, evolution, and biblical perspectives on science. So, Dr. Veith, welcome.
Thank you.
I appreciate your coming to my channel. And let's start. I have many questions for you. So, first one is, if the world was initially created as good and without death, why were many animals created with anatomy and instincts that are ideal for hunting and killing? For example, how do you explain the existence of venom glands in snakes or spiders if animals were created originally as herbivores?
Right. The first part of your question is the world still the same as it was when it was created? Obviously not. Some changes have taken place. And the scriptures are pretty clear of what it was like in the beginning and what it is like now. For example, there was no rain in the pre-flood world. There was a mist that covered the earth during the morning, and there was like a tidal system where the groundwater came up and fed the plants. And you still have vestiges of systems like that that keep environments evergreen and in a beautiful state, like, for example, in the state of Florida, where the water table is very high, and even in times of drought, the area is lush and green because of a system that is similar to that, with a rise and fall, almost like a tidal system in the groundwater. So that was the system before the flood. There were no harsh climatic changes, and the vegetation was far more diversified than we have today. And how do we know that? We know that from the fossil record. We have a fraction left of what was originally there. Everything was larger, everything was more lush, everything was bigger, everything was stronger, as depicted in our massive coal seams, oil fields, you name it. There are thousands and thousands of fossils of things that existed that do not exist, and do not exist in the form that they existed then. We have many climbing plants that have thorns, and we have thistles. And the Bible is also clear that these didn't exist prior to the flood. So when Adam and Eve sinned, the scripture says that the earth is cursed for thy sake. For the sake of the people, the earth was cursed. That means there must be some benefit in the change as well. And what happened? Well, the serpent was commanded that he would crawl on his belly. So we assume he didn't crawl on his belly before. We are told that thorns and thistles will arise, and that the circumstances will be totally changed. So within the animal, there is a vast genetic diversity, much greater than we can even anticipate. And the original designed features in many of the plants and animals that we have today are altered by deactivating certain genetic systems, enhancing others, and changing a way in which the genes are expressed. For example, a thorn is either a transformed leaf. Normally, when a leaf unfolds, it grows and it folds open. In a thorn, the same gene that codes for the leaf structure, when it develops, turns in upon itself, dries out, and makes a spike. That's one way in which thorns are formed. So it's the same genetic system with an altered expression. Then you have some thorns which are epidermal outgrowths that grow out of a stem. You have some thorns that are sitting on top of, let's say, a cactus plant, where the leaf structure now is the actual stem become like a leaf, and the original leaves have become thorns. So these are mechanisms to conserve water and to survive harsh conditions. So the same genetic material is programmed or reprogrammed in order to express itself differently. So is there any evidence, let's say, for example, that snakes had legs? And the answer is yes. There are many, many snakes. For example, pythons and many grass snakes, for example, have rudimentary legs. That means tiny little vestiges of legs. They're perfectly and anatomically perfect, but they're just rudiments. They are tiny, they are useless, they are not capable of performing any function. But that means that the genes for legs still exist in these creatures. And then you have snakes that don't have legs, that sometimes in their embryology develop like leg structures, but that don't come to the fore. So the genes are there, but they're masked. They are switched off. They are deactivated. So that's the first. Many structures that are harmful today. You asked about the venom in snakes, and you asked about the venom in spiders, for example. These creatures produce a venom, but what is that venom? The venom is actually produced by a salivary gland or by an ovipositor. Now, what is the function, therefore? So originally, this was for injecting a digestive enzyme into some object. And if the Bible says that all the animals ate plant material in the beginning and will return to eating plant material, then we have to look at it from that viewpoint and if this is possible or plausible. So, for example, why do animals have canines? Why do they have teeth that seem to be able to tear things apart, etc., etc.? But let's get there systematically. Let's start with the venom of a snake. The venom of a snake is produced from a transformed salivary gland, and it contains enzymes which digest materials. So originally it could have been ingested into a particular plant type that happened to be the food source of that animal, and it was injected and liquefied, and then it was consumed. Now, when a foreign protein is injected into a human being, there is an adverse reaction, depending on the type of protein and the type of material that is injected. We call that an allergic reaction. And some of it can be putrefying, like if it is digestive material, it can actually liquefy your flesh. That would be the type of venom you would find in, for example, a puff adder. Or it has a neurologically effect and makes your nervous system incapable of functioning properly. That would be the venom of, let's say, a cobra. So that's a neurotoxin, and the other one is more of a systemic toxin. So any protein, any foreign protein that enters into the bloodstream directly or is injected into your bloodstream will produce an adverse reaction, which can be fatal. And if you are particularly allergic to something, then even a normal food protein, like let's say a peanut, can create an allergic reaction that can kill you. How much more so if it is injected into you? So was it originally designed to kill, or was it originally designed to digest something else? That is the question we have to ask ourselves. Now, if the sting is on the other side and not on the mouth side, then obviously it's not the digestive enzyme that is injected, but let's say a bee or a wasp or any one of those creatures. Well, what is that? Now, the sting of these creatures are actually transformed ovipositors. That's for egg laying. Now, the glands that are associated with the ovipositor, they produce proteins, like the albumin protein that is around an egg. And if that were to be injected into your bloodstream, then that would also create a foreign protein immune reaction. And therefore, you would feel immediate response. Your antibodies would go crazy. You would develop a rash or a red area and experience pain. So was it originally designed to kill and inject animals, or was it there to lay eggs? And I expand a little bit on the bee, for example. A bee has a stinger that if it stings you, it will actually die, because if it stings a mammal, it gets stuck in the skin. If it stings another creature that doesn't have the type of skin we have, it can get by without it. So why does it have an ovipositor if it doesn't lay eggs? Well, if you take a bee, a worker bee, does a worker bee have the capacity to be a queen, which lays the eggs, for example? And the answer is yes. How do we know that? Because if a bee hive has an occurrence where the queen actually dies, then something happens in the bees that are in the colony. Those that were closely associated with the queen itself start eating what the queen normally eats, namely royal jelly, which is actually queen food. And when the worker bee eats royal jelly, genes within its system that are latent there, that are masked, that are covered and not active, become active. And they are transformed into a queen. And they start laying eggs, and the ovipositor does what it's supposed to do, namely be involved in the egg laying process. So what we know for sure is that these objects that create pain and can cause death also originally must have had a different function. And we still have the expression of that function to be absolutely positive, like, for example, in the transformation of a worker into a queen bee. And that's a diet-induced change. So that opens up another question. The type of diet that you eat, like if a bee eats royal jelly, it becomes a queen. The type of diet that you eat, can it affect your anatomy? Can it affect your structure? Can it affect the way in which your genes are expressed? Can it be positive? Can it be negative? And the answer to all of those questions must be yes, right? So we must look at the world then and the world now. And instead of saying this looks like a design feature to kill and to create harm, we must ask the question, why is it now used for that purpose when originally it might have been used for another purpose? Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much. And the question that comes to my mind is why are they at all carnivores? Because God could, even with idea of fall and sinful world, why he allowed that animals become carnivores? They all could be eating plants. So what is your answer?
And let me give you a few examples in the world. There's a parrot that lives in New Zealand. It's a very common parrot. It's known as a key parrot. And the key parrot has a particular diet in nature. And one of its dietary components is the succulent root of a particular tree type, where the root is succulent, like a carrot, for example. A carrot is a root, but it is crunchy and palatable. Now, the beak of the parrot and the claws of the parrot enable it to clear up the root so that they can get to it. And the beak is very sharp with a sharp point like a parrot's beak. And it can rip into this tree and consume it very easily. Excuse me. So that's what it was originally doing there. And then with the process of urbanization in many areas, there was a lot of land clearing, and the original source of food was gone. And then, to their dismay, they found out that these parrots were now killing sheep. They were sitting on the back of a sheep, and with their strong little claws, they could grab hold of the sheep and couldn't be shaken. And then with that sharp beak, they would dig through the muscles of the back all the way through to the internal organs, and they would consume the fat around the kidneys. And there were hundreds of dead sheep everywhere. So let's say some disease had wiped out those trees before man came to New Zealand, and they found this parrot eating animals and eating animal kidney fat. They would look at this animal and say, wow, look at this design feature, this very sharp pointed beak, and these claws that enable it to cling to the back of these animals so that they can't be shaken are design features to kill and to destroy. What was the solution? Replant the trees. And the problem was gone. They returned to their original diet. So let's go back to the antediluvian world, a world in which there were thousands of plant types that don't exist today. And many, many animals had particular sources of food created for their specific needs. And we know that different animals have different dietary needs. And some animals will not even be able to eat the plants that some animals eat. Like, for example, the koala bear eats eucalyptus leaves. Eucalyptus is something that is detrimental to any other animal that eats it. It has health benefits, and it also contains like a narcotic. That's why koala bears are very docile and sleep a lot. But that's their diet. They're capable of eating it. Or let's take the tobacco feeders. They have specific enzymes that excrete nicotine. So they eat these plants and they don't have any problems eating them because they have enzymes to get rid of the nicotine. But any other animal that eats it has serious problems. And if man thinks he can smoke it and get away without getting cancer, then he's also demented. All right, so there was this original food source, and then the climate changes, and all of a sudden these plants start dying out. So the animals that consume them have two options. They either adapt or they die. So if your food source is suddenly gone, what do? Let me give you another example. Let's say you have apricot trees. And the apricot tree produces its fruit once a month. That means throughout the year, there are apricots. And then something changes in the season. You have a stronger winter and a different kind of summer. And the tree no longer produces fruit every single month, but only, let's say, 3 months of the year. That means for 9 months, that food source is gone. Now, if you are a ladybird and you eat apricots, because ladybirds eat apricots. That's their main food source if it's there. Then for 9 months, there are no apricots. So what does the ladybird do? It either eats something else or it dies. And so the ladybird has become adapted to become a carnivore, if you like, and eats plant lice. So it's a very useful little creature, except in the apricot season when it loves apricots and climbs into your apricot trees. So something changed and the diet changed. All right. Now, a carnivore, like a lion or a leopard or a dog, is classified according to his teeth. And because he has large canines, he's classified as a carnivore. Now, does that mean that the teeth were designed to eat flesh? The answer is the teeth are capable of tearing flesh. Doesn't mean they were designed to eat flesh. What if there is a carnivore that still has its original diet and didn't need to eat flesh? Is there an animal like that? And the answer is yes. The panda bear. The panda bear is classified as a carnivore because it has the same canine structure as any other carnivore, but it eats bamboo. And those teeth are perfectly adapted because the molars at the back act like scissors, like a lion's would, and the canines enable them to rip open the sharp bamboo. Now, what if there were other plants that were similar but no longer exist today? Then those animals would have had to change their diet. So the fact that they have a specific tooth structure doesn't mean they were designed to kill because they are capable of killing. I'll give you another example. A parrot has a very, very strong beak, and it can take your finger off with one bite. And it has very sharp claws and a very strong grip with which it can take hold of things. You can go into a tug of war with it. Now, the beak is no less strong than the beak of an eagle, for example. And the feet are not less capable of grabbing hold of something than the feet of an eagle, for example. So he's capable of doing it, but he doesn't do it because he eats seeds. But he can do it. And there are parrots that for sport kill animals. I had a friend who had a parrot, and whenever he came, his parrot used to sit on top of the cage. And whenever he came to the cage, he put it outside in the garden. And there were dead birds all around. And he was wondering what was going on there, because he could never see it. And then he set up a camera system to find out what was happening. And the parrot had developed a game. He took some of his own seeds, that was his food supply, and scattered them around his cage. And then he waited for the birds to come and eat those seeds. And when the birds were there to eat it, he would kill them with one bite of that sharp beak. Now, just because you have equipment that looks like it is designed to kill doesn't mean that it was originally designed to kill. So what are the other design features of a carnivore? They have a very short gut. In fact, the gut of a carnivore is only 6 times the length of the trunk of the animal. Whereas a herbivore that eats only plants will have a gut that is 22 times the length of the trunk. So you can see there's a massive reduction in gut length in a carnivore. And why is that? And then you have a human being that acts today more like an omnivore and eats all kinds of things. So his gut length is about 15 times trunk length. So you have a carnivore with a very short gut, you have a complete herbivore with a very long gut, and you have something in between, like the human being, and most omnivores have an in-between gut. Was it designed like that, or is it a consequence of the diet? Now, a lion, for example, eats meat. How much fiber is there in meat? None. Zero. Let me just see something here. There is zero fiber in meat. That means that a gut can become very congested and serious problems can arise in the gut as a consequence. So one adaptive feature that you can have to solve the problem is to shorten the gut. So how many millions of years does it take to shorten the gut from 22 times trunk length, if you are a plant eater, to 6 times the length? Well, we know that if you put a lion or a carnivore on a plant-based diet, then the gut gets longer. I've done experiments like that in my own labs. And we experimented with many animals. For example, we took chickens once and raised chicken from hatching to 6 weeks. And because the industry feeds the chickens carcass meal and fish meal and things like that, animal protein. And some farmers feed only grains and maize, etc., so plant-based protein. And I wanted to know what the difference was going to be. And those that were fed animal protein had numerous disease components that the others didn't have. But surprisingly, their gut was considerably shorter than when they got plant-based protein. So it only takes 6 weeks to alter the chain, the gut significantly, statistically significantly. So these adaptive changes could have happened very rapidly. And it is also known, by the way, that animals that are carnivore today, like lions and dogs, etc., if you switch them to a more herbivore diet, they actually have far fewer diseases and they live even up to twice as long as their other companions. Does that answer your question?
Almost. I have a question for sharks and crocodiles. How do you explain them? Because they are in water and something. So,
Okay, sharks and crocodiles. Sharks and crocodiles have very sharp teeth, and they are either whole eaters, breaking things apart, or roll and rip eaters, like a crocodile. Grabs onto something, rolls and rips and eats. All right, now, what were the original water systems on Earth? Was there an ocean like we have today that is exceedingly salty? Or was it a different situation? Well, we get a couple of hints out of the Bible, for example. The Bible says, in the world created anew, there will no longer be any sea. The ocean will be gone. So what did you have before? You had lakes, huge lakes. Were these saltwater lakes? The answer is probably no. They were freshwater lakes. And were they very deep, like our oceans that are kilometers deep? Or were they shallow? And the answer is they were probably shallow. So the Earth was covered in beautiful lake systems with relatively shallow water. When I say shallow, shallow enough that sunlight could penetrate to the base. We don't have that today. We don't have an ocean where sunlight penetrates to the base. It only penetrates to a certain distance, and then things get darker and darker, and eventually even have funny-looking fish that have luminescence, etc., to be able to exist at the bottom of some of our systems. All right. So you had vast, shallow basins Was the ocean salty or was it freshwater? It was probably freshwater. How do we know? Well, if you look at fish, for example, then fish have kidneys that have a structure which is called the glomerulus. Now, you and I also have a glomerulus in our kidneys, and the glomerulus is designed to get rid of excess water. So when you drink a lot of water, your kidneys ultrafiltrate the liquid through the glomerulus and then absorb some of the minerals, and you discard the rest as water in your urine. So the glomerulus is a water discarding structure. And all fish in freshwater have very active glomeruli. The reason being, they're living in water. Water diffuses into their system, and they constantly have to get rid of excess water because the fish is more salty than the water. So it gets rid of the excess water through the glomerulus. Now, marine fish also have a glomerulus, but it never works. It's not supposed to work, because if it worked, the fish would die. The reason being, salt water is more salty than the fish. And so by osmosis, the fish is actually dehydrating. So it has to drink seawater. But it can't drink seawater because seawater is too high in salt. So it has developed glands in the gills that excrete the salt so that they have fresh water, in like a desalinating plant within the gills. And the glomerulus is kept dormant. It never works. So we say they are functionally aglomerular. They have them, but they don't use them. Now, why do you have a structure that you never use? The reason is because you probably used it in the past. And many fish that live in the sea, like salmon, for example, when they go into fresh water, their glomerulus becomes active. So it's inactive in the sea and it's active in the fresh water. So the oceans didn't exist. There were huge lakes. There were shallow lakes. Now, shallow can be several meters deep, but the sunlight must reach the bottom. What do you get in circumstances like that? You get plant growth on the bottom of the water, right? And today, when you go to the ocean, you have seaweed and you have seaweed beds, and they stretch out for as far as sunlight reaches the bottom, and then they're gone, right? Now, if the animals were algal feeders, and seaweed is a type of algae, then there would have been a vast amount of food for the animals stretching across the entire base of the lake. Now, you will only find that base on the areas where light penetrates. So what kind of plants were there? We don't know, except that the fossil record shows there were very many kinds of, water plants. And some of these must have been pretty tough. And let's say there was a particularly tough one, and you needed sharp teeth to cling onto it and to use a roll action to break the thing down and break it off so that you can eat it piece by piece. Would that satisfy the needs of a crocodile? All right. What about sharks? If you had certain algae which were very tough and need to be broken down by very sharp teeth, then you need a certain strength and a certain tooth structure that will solve that problem. So a shark doesn't have teeth like we have. They're actually transformed scales, and they keep growing in, and a scale gets transformed into a shark tooth, and it breaks off periodically, and new ones are formed all the time. And so they can eat these hard things. Do we have animals that eat hard things that replace their teeth today? And the answer is yes. Take an elephant. An elephant eats hard things like twigs and tree branches and bark, and its teeth get used up pretty quickly. So you and I, we can change our teeth twice. We have milk teeth, and then we get adult teeth, and then you have to live with them until you die. All right? And then you have an elephant. How often does an elephant change its teeth? 6 times. 6 times. It gets 6 new sets because it requires them for the type of diet that it eats. When it gets its 6th set, then that's his last chance. If he's used them up, he dies because he can't eat his food anymore. So he's been given a life expectancy of 6 tooth changes. Does he have behavioral adaptations to try and make his teeth last as long as possible? And the answer is yes. Now, an elephant doesn't have teeth with which it can bite off a leaf. It has to rip off the leaf, or if it eats grass, it has to wrap its trunk around the grass, and he has to rip up the whole lot. He gets it up, roots and all, right? Now, those roots, will they have sand on them? Yes. If you were to chew that sand, would it wear his teeth down sooner? Yes. So it's interesting to watch an elephant. When he rips up a pile of grass, he will shake it against some hard object to get rid of the sand to protect his teeth. And so the question always is, what was the original diet? Now, if you have suddenly, you have a worldwide flood, all the waters of the deep burst forth, the great salt streams in the earth that provided the minerals in a controlled fashion so that plants would always be perfectly mineralized and have lush growth. When all of those now are dumped into the sea and the sea becomes a salt environment, and then there are such depths because the water that was below the crust is now above the crust, that the oceans have become very deep. The original diet of those animals is gone. It no longer exists. So they have transformed and have become carnivores and opportunists, using the same equipment for another purpose. And those creatures that couldn't survive the change, we're probably driving with our cars with them today, because they have become part of the great organic soup that was turned into oil. And all the debris and plant material that rotted with it is today what we call oil fields and coal fields and all kinds of things like that. Some coal fields, did you know, consist only of bark? Some coal fields of bark or of fern leaves or of tree trunks. And depending on what you have soft coal or brown coal or hard coal or anthracite coal. How would you separate burying a tree? How would you separate the bark from the tree if it wasn't through a catastrophe? So when you have a major water catastrophe and the plants are being churned and the trees are being bumped up against each other, they are stripped of their bark, the bark settles down and you have a brown coal field of bark. Then the tree trunk itself gets buried and they become the hard coal. And the leaves and the things get separated and they become a different kind of coal. That's how you get the situation that we have. So the pre-flood world was a different planet. It was a different environment. The animals ate different things. The food source was there 24/7 throughout every season, because the Bible tells us that the trees bore their fruit once a month. There was never a time when they didn't have fruit. Not so today. Today you have vines. Take for example, a tomato, like the Americans would say. A tomato grows today on a herb. And that herb lasts for a very short season, and then it dies, and you plant a new tomato and it bears fruit. Well, they found that if you give it polarized light, then it actually grows into something like a tree and bears fruit much more prolifically. So today we only have a vestige of what is left. It must have been an amazing variety of things. And the vines that we have today, many of them are flowering vines, like the morning glory, for example. It's a pest. It grows over everything. It overgrows the trees. But a flower implies fruit, but it doesn't bear any fruit. Maybe under a different perfect environment, these climbing vines that are sometimes thorns and destructive today were beautiful structures that actually bore fruit. So I think the pre-flood world was a very beautiful place. And if you look at any paleontology book, you will see how they depict the vegetation as always as lush and gorgeous. Whereas the post-flood world is full of deserts and thorns and thistles and animals that kill and animals that create pain. Now, I'm sure one of your questions is, what about a parasite, right?
Yeah, that's the next one, because there are parasites that feed by host's blood. So how is that explaining creationist framework? But yeah, I agree. You nicely said that that was another planet. Even Apostle Peter said that that was another world or old world, how he said. Yeah.
Let's look at some of them. Let's go progressively through them. You have some parasites like mosquitoes that drink blood. You have some that invade your system and live within you and chew you up from inside. And you have all of these different parasites, some of them very debilitating. You have certain parasitic worms like nematodes and tapeworms that invade your gut, for example. Where do they come from? And what does this entail? Excuse me. All right, let's go through them. The mosquito. The mosquito has an apparatus, a mouth part, which is called a proboscis, which acts like a syringe, like a drill. And it drills into you and it sucks your blood. And there are certain glands associated with it that prevent coagulation. They produce anticoagulants. And they inject those anticoagulants, and those anticoagulants are proteins because they have an enzymatic function. And they create an allergic reaction. So you create a bump and an itch. And they're very irritating. And then they carry parasites and diseases just to make your life more miserable. All right. Now, that structure is obviously designed to drink blood because it has all the capacity to do so. Then why is it that only the female drinks blood and not the male? The male has exactly the same structure, but it eats only plant juice. So it injects that little thing into the plant and sucks up the juice. Now, plant juice also jellifies. In other words, if you take the juice, let's say, of a fig, and you put it on your skin, it'll become sticky, right? Because there are substances in it which make it jellify, so that if the plant is damaged, it would stop, let's say, the bleeding of the plant juice, right? So there are coagulants in it. So the enzyme that the male has prevents the coagulation. Otherwise, if that coagulation takes place in his proboscis, which is like a straw, it would become non-functional. It would become clogged. So the enzymes prevent that. What if those same enzymes can prevent blood clotting? And what if the plant juice is no longer as nutritious as it was in the pre-flood world, and the female has to produce eggs and needs a lot of energy and has found another juice that is more more nutritious of what needs are. And so she sucks blood. Was she designed to suck blood? No, she was designed to suck plant juice that provides everything that she needs, but because something changed in the environment and the plant no longer produces exactly what she needs, she's found another source. Very irritating. So the male tells us what it was like originally. The female tells us something has changed. Next, the parasite. Parasites have various life cycles, and they have larval stages, and they have adult stages, and they have morphic changes as they go along. So let's take any parasite. A parasite that has a larval stage has a free-swimming larvae. And those free-swimming larvae have intestines, they have eyes, they have swimming organs. So the question is, that egg that produces the larvae, does it have the genes for eyes and for swimming organs and for digestive systems? Obviously, yes, because the larva has them, right? It can swim, has eyes to see where it's going, and it has a digestive system to digest whatever it eats, diatoms or unicellular creatures in the water. That's the larval stage. Now, when it transforms, it enters into the system of a host, whatever that host is, whether it be a crab, whether it be a fish, whether it be a human being, whatever it is. So let's say you get that larvae into your system. If it lives in your gut, does it need a digestive system if you are digesting everything for it? No. So it doesn't develop a digestive system. Can it develop a digestive system? Obviously, because its larva has a digestive system. But those genes are then deactivated. It doesn't need it anymore. It's now living in your gut. Is it light or dark in there? It's pretty dark in your gut. Does it need eyes? No. The larva has eyes, but it doesn't have eyes. So it has genes for eyes, but it doesn't use them. So now it's become a parasite. Now, let's say, for example, you go from a larva to an adult and your food source that was originally there is no longer there. How convenient to use someone else as a food source, isn't it? Or else die out. So these creatures that become parasites were originally never parasites. And by the way, evolution implies change to improvement. All of the examples that you have, like parasites, are all devolution, never evolution. It's always the loss of something, the loss of a gut, the loss of the eyes, the loss of a limb, the loss of a this, the loss of a that, because you no longer need it in the environment that you are in. It's not evolution, it's devolution, it's backwards, it's reversed. So originally, the design was perfect. There was a stage development, but the nutrient supply was perfect. Now it's disrupted, and therefore the animals adapt, and they become devilized, not in terms of devil, but devolving, losing things that they had, not gaining things that they had, and becoming toxic in the process. Because if you are living in someone else and eating what they are providing for you, don't you also utilize it and put out waste products? Absolutely. And those waste products are toxic. So do you become toxic to your host? Yes, to the point where you can kill your host. Was it designed that way? No, it's a result of a changed environment.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And now, why there are such systems like camouflage? If world was created perfectly in some harmony, or how you say, why is there need for something like camouflage? That's a bit evil.
Okay. Have you seen what animals that are on reproductive displays, what they look like? What birds of paradise, for example, look like? How colorful they are, how majestic they are, how magnificent they look. Now, that is an evolutionary no-no. Because animals, if you are living in a hostile environment, would tend to rather want to blend with the environment than to stand out with magnificent displays. Isn't that so? If you take a peacock, for example, is he hiding his glory or is he displaying his glory? He's displaying his glory, right? Now, what if you had the capacity to change your color in a reproductive display? What if you could flash bright reds and bright pinks and greens and oranges and yellows and go through entire displays? If that was your secondary sex characteristic ritual, wouldn't that be magnificent? So animals were designed to display. Today, you will find that it is largely the male that is able to display maximally, whereas the female tends to be pretty bland. Why? Because we're living in a very hostile world where the female, who is vulnerable when she has chicks, for example, needs to rather hide than display herself, right? Does she have the genes for display? The answer is yes, because the next generation, males, also gets genes from her, so the genes must be there, but they must be suppressed. So display and splashes where there was no detrimental effect, no death, no danger, must have been on a scale that is unimaginable today. If you take certain birds, for example, what they look like in one area or what they look like in another area. Take the ibis, the sacred ibis, which is this bright, beautiful pink in one area and a bland, sort of non-existent gray in another area. So what were the animals like in the past? They were animals of display, animals of color, animals of change. Now, if a very non-hostile environment changes into a very hostile environment, would it be possible to use that display in order to blend into the background and be non-visible? Is it possible that that which was there to display beauty and excellence can now be used to hide? Is that possible? So why do they have the capacity to change their color? Well, because color was a secondary sex characteristic to attract. Now, by adapting the colors to the, what I said is the capacity to alternate the color for display. Same capacity can be used to alternate the color to camouflage. I just wanted to say that which used for display just as well used for camouflage. I think the world was a very colorful, very gorgeous, wonderful place. If you go to a bird of paradise, overall by the colors and the displays, it's a remnant of what they used to be. Now, if you put that on a universal scale, and how the animals must have been able to flash their colors and express even emotions and feelings, etc., through color, it must have been a very, very beautiful place.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Veith. And now, what about predators that torture their victims before consuming it, like a cat that play with mouse and then eat him? So, how do you explain that?
Okay. Darwin already said that he thinks evolution exists because why would God allow? And therefore he said he doesn't, God is a benevolent God there, and therefore it gets to the point where God exists. Everything is evolution. Now, you can look at the world's lesson book in two different ways. You can world as it is, or you the scriptures and see what it was like, and scriptures that the world and the state that it is, not because of anything that God did, but because of an enemy did. And those two things are totally separate. So it depends on your worldview. What the world of pain and evolution and progress through death? Or was the world a place of beauty and harmony, and death is a consequence of an intruder called sin? And what are the consequences of sin? Does sin cause pain? Yes. Does transgression of God's cause pain? Well, you are mad in love with a girl, and she or you break the seventh, or they're incredibly unhappy. What if one of the partners breaks the seventh commandment and the other one runs out? Is he happy or is he unhappy? He's unhappy, right? And because of the unhappy, sin causes pain. And the character of evil is a character that is inclined to produce maximum pain on any level, whether in a fast process or in a subliminal process. The end results of transgression is always pain. And a planet in rebellion is a planet in pain. So, what does the Bible say on that issue? Doesn't it say the whole creation groaneth, waiting for the manifestation of the sons of God and the setting up of the kingdom of God? The things that we see that are hard to explain. I mean, biting an animal in half, the other half still lives because it has a head, surely creates pain. Was that God's design, or is it a consequence? So when animals play with animals, when there is pain, then yes. Then was it God or is it something else? Let's take two animals. Let's take a lion and a wild dog. When a lion catches its prey, what does it do? The male lion attaches itself to the throat and to the windpipe and squeezes it so that the animal can no longer breathe, so that the animal dies quickly. Then they eat the animal. It's a very humane way of killing the animal. It's fast, it's efficient, and they have food. It wasn't designed that way because the Bible says there was no death. How does a wild dog do it? A wild dog pack runs after an animal and takes bites out of the animal as the animal is running. Eventually, the animal loses so much blood that it collapses after a long, long struggle, being ripped apart piece by piece by piece. It's a very slow and painful death. eventually the animal falls down and they start eating anyway. They don't kill it and then eat it. So it's a very painful death. Did God design it that way? Or is the wild dog just not capable of doing what the lion is doing and is doing the best he can under the circumstances, needs food, and that's his way of doing it? It's a torturous, terrible way. And you look at it and you cringe with disgust. It's the wages of sin is death, and the wages of sin is pain. And the Bible says there will be no more pain, there will be no more tears, and God will wipe away all tears. That means all pain, all suffering, all kinds of abnormal behaviors will be gone.
Okay, thank you so much. And this question is similar. You covered this a little, but can you explain about insects such as praying mantises that have specialized front legs that are clearly designed for capturing and holding prey?
Okay. People say that the Bible is not a biological book and that it has errors in it. And that is because they misunderstand what the Bible is about, and they misunderstand biology in general. I'm a zoologist, and I was an atheist in the past, and I would look at these verses in the Bible, and I would say, well, God certainly doesn't know his biology, because it says that certain insects that walk on all fours are unclean. And I would argue, but that's ridiculous because insects don't walk on fours, they walk on sixes. One of the features of an insect is that it has 6 legs. And then I started discovering that the Bible has more truth than I could ever have imagined. And I discovered that I had to reinvestigate my biology because my biology was skewed by modern taxonomy and evolutionary ideas. So maybe an insect doesn't have 6 legs, but 4, like the Bible says. So I started looking at these animals in a little bit more detail, and I realized, you know what? We biologists, we're wrong. The Bible is right. A fly doesn't have 6 legs, it has 4. The 2 front ones are used like hands. So you will find a fly sitting there cleaning its eyes with its front legs. Have you seen that? And when it walks, it can walk on those 6, but often it walks only on 4s, and the front ones are used for different purposes. They're used for grabbing hold of things and cleaning things like your eyes, for example, or cleaning your head or your body. So in actual fact, it looks like 6 limbs, but in actual fact, it's 4 legs and 2 that get used like arms. Same happens with a praying mantis. It walks on 4, but it's an insect, so it should have 6, right? Because according to biological classification, it has 6 legs, but no, it walks on 4. And it's an unclean animal because it's a carnivore, and therefore it is unclean. Now, those front legs were used for different purposes, cleaning eyes, doing this, doing that. Now, what if those front legs are quite large and can be used like karate weapons? Were they then designed to be used as karate weapons, or can they be used as karate weapons? Your hands, were they designed to break people's collarbones and to stab out people's eyes? Were they designed for that? No. They were designed so that you could work, do all kinds of tasks, and even play the piano and musical instruments. That's what they were designed for. A karate expert, can he use that hand to break your collarbone in one flash? All the time, wouldn't we say that the hand was designed to stab out eyes and break collarbones? just because it has a design feature doesn't mean it was designed for that.
Right, thank you. And this is similar question. What about those parasites that, for example, lay eggs and then slowly killing a victim, like allowing the larva to slowly consume it from the inside before eventually killing it? So why are those biological systems even in existence?
As a consequence of sin. The original food source, like I've said, is gone. They have adopted a new food source, and even if that food source kills the victim, eventually, as long as the larva survives, the deed has been done. So there will be no parasites in the new world. There will be no creature utilizing another one for its meals. If you go through the creation account, plants were created on the third day. And the definition is that they are for food. Animals were created on the fifth and the sixth day. And they were not designed for food. They have a different system. They have a vascular system and they have a nervous system. In other words, they were created for communication. And a plant doesn't have a nervous system. A plant is living food. So the plants that existed then supplied all the food for every creature that was there. And the other creatures, like those that came on the fifth and the sixth day, were designed to interact with nature and to make nature a harmonious whole. So a hummingbird, with its capacity to stick its tongue right down into a plant and suck up the nectar, and in the process, the beak will pick up the pollen, was a pollinator. So it received something, it received nectar, and in turn pollinated something else. Every single creature, the bee, had little hair structures to pick up the pollen to do something else. Everything was designed to receive and to give. And we, as human beings, were also designed to receive benevolence from God and to spread it to others. So there must have been a harmonious system, which somehow has broken down so that today you have criminals and you have murderers and you have rapists. And that's why you have to have jails and policemen and gallows and firing squads and electric chairs to solve the problem. Does that mean you were designed to be a killer and a rapist and a thief and a robber? No. So exactly what happened to humanity happened to the animal kingdom as well. The whole creation is groaning.
Really good, thank you. And if carnivores emerged after the fall, how did they develop the necessary physiological characteristics like sharp teeth, enzymes for digesting meat, etc., in such a short period?
All right. How long does it take to adapt? As I've told you before, in our experiments with chickens, for example, the adaptation to a to an animal-based diet, for example, takes place in 6 weeks. And if you take Spaldex, which is like a mole rat, if environment becomes tough, the adaptation takes place in 1 generation. So there are massive genetic restructurings that take place. We have what we call jumping genes. We have transposons. We can change an animal from a giant rat into a tiny rat in 1 generation, or vice versa, depending on which genes are activated. It doesn't have to take millions of years. And once it's settled into a routine, then it stays fixed like that.
Okay, and why is the world designed in such a way that ecosystems depend on predators to maintain balance?
Because death has entered the equation. If there were no death, there would be no carnivore. If there were no carnivore, there would be no scavenger. So you wouldn't need a bird like a vulture to change its habits and become a vulture. And you wouldn't need a carnivore to become a carnivore if there were no death. Each one would have had assigned his original food. And the wages of sin is death. And death brings with us a whole cascade of ecological requirements, so that you have from the death to the scavenger to the decomposer, all of it in that equation, which was not there from the beginning.
Amazing. If species were created independently, why does the nature exhibit so many suboptimal designs? For example, the recurrent laryngeal nerve in giraffes.
All right, let me ask you a question. Will the two people that look absolutely identical in this world please get up? And the
Yeah,
answer
no,
is,
such a thing.
we're all different. All right, if we are all different, does that mean that God is a God of variety or a God of singularity? God is a God of variety, right? He's a God of variety. He uses basic design structures, which are common to certain categories of animals, but the variety is amazing. If you have 3 dogs, won't you be able to recognize them each individually and give them a name? So that means God is the God of variety. Now, if that variety exists within the one species, then how far do you design a species? What is a species? Is a species what we design today, or is a species far wider than we design today? And the answer is it's probably far wider than we design today. I would take it down to the level of the family, not even the genus. I'd take it down to the level of the family. So originally, all canines came from one kind. Like all dog races come from the wolf. That means all dog races are potentially in the genetic system of the wolf. So God is a God of variety, but variety within a certain parameter, which he designed as, which he phrased a kind. We have broken it down further to the ridiculous, where you count the hairs and make them different species because they have different numbers of hairs. Well, would you do that to a human being? Then a bald man would be another species. That's ridiculous. So let's take it down to the level of maybe genus, but probably family. That would be a kind. And everything that you have, all the ungulates, all the canines that you have, all fall within that one category, within that great potential for all that variety. God is a lover of variety.
Okay, Dr. Fight, but would you agree that there are some animals that are just ugly, like vampire bats? Would you agree that they are maybe not so pretty?
Would you agree that there are some ladies that are not pretty?
Um, yeah, I don't know.
And this is a horrible topic. All right, let's change
Yeah.
it. Would you agree there are some men that are not handsome? The answer is yes, right? There are some that are more beautiful than others, and mankind has managed to make money out of that, so that if you are aesthetically more attractive, then you attract either more sin or more money. So either way, it becomes a negative and not a positive. The fact of the matter is, sin has caused degeneration and deterioration. If you take the dog race, there are some dog races that are exceedingly ugly, but they still have some characteristics which are adorable, and therefore people are inclined to look past the ugliness to accept the other characteristics. Like, for example, a bulldog is certainly not a picture of beauty. And so, was it originally like that? No, originally everything was beautiful. But by elevating certain gene systems and degenerating others, we have become distorted. And you know that distortion is often diet related. Certain races of people are dwarfs compared to other races of people simply on the basis of their diet. And you have vast changes in appearance, let's say from pre-war, pre-Second World War, to post-Second World War, where certain races of men were very small and, well, deteriorated in terms of stature. But post-World War II, where the economy has expanded and nutrients are brought in from various places, that has totally changed. And where people were originally very dwarfed in appearance, they now are very large in appearance. So diet has a tremendous role to play, and change of diet has a tremendous role to play. If a lion still looks regal and beautiful today, imagine what he must have looked like before the fall. He must have been magnificent.
Dr. Fights, thank you. This is last question for you. So, is creationism or intelligent design open to falsification? Because if something is scientific, then you can falsify or prove that it's not correct. So, what evidence would you need to accept evolution, for example? Can you say?
All right. Evolution has a basic premise, and that is that you are not allowed to introduce a divine foot into the equation. In other words, by its very nature, evolution is atheistic. God had nothing to do with it. And once you assume an axiom that everything is naturalistic and nothing is divine, then you are stuck with that paradigm. You can't really change it. And this is quite a serious flaw, because what if the design feature was actually a reality? You would have to negate it on the basis of your theory. So that's a flaw in evolution. You would have to accept the lie because the truth is not permissible. So if God designed it, but there is no God, therefore he didn't design it, then the design feature that you have must have miraculously somehow appeared. Now, there are certain features that we call irreducible. In other words, everything has to be in place for the thing to work. So you can't produce it incrementally. You can't improve it until it works well. Everything has to be there, like the motor of a flagellum, that drives a cell forward, like a sperm cell, that flagellum. The motor is a hydrogen-powered motor. It is highly complex, but it only works when it is complete. It cannot evolve incrementally. It's either all there or it isn't. So by any stretch of the imagination, it is a magnificent design. It cannot be evolution. And you would have to argue that it came about by chance, which is a ridiculous argument, but by definition is the only one that is left you because there's no God. So that's the dilemma that you sit with. You could throw those things to an evolutionist until you're blue in the face. I know, because I was an evolutionist. It will never convince you that there is a design and that there is a God. Even though it stumps you and you have to create all kinds of a priori assumptions and new theories to try and explain it, like a gradualist becoming a punctuated equilibriumist because he cannot explain the absence of all the fossils that are missing. But you're still an evolutionist. Once you start understanding the Bible, once you start understanding prophecy, and know that God knows things from the beginning to the end and can foretell the future and has proved it in history, then God becomes a reality. Once God is a reality, then he's a reality in nature as well. And therefore, all of these things that are inexplicable in terms of science and which must be magically conjured up by some tremendous chance become design features. So you have a choice. You can either accept the God of creation or you could set him aside. Then study prophecy. If you can then set him aside, then I feel sorry for you.
All right, Dr. Veith, have you any conclusion for the end to people in Serbia? Because this is Serbian podcast. So do you have any conclusion at this topic? Why is evil in design and other things? So any last word?
Well, I would say to the Serbian people that originally you were a very religious nation. But circumstances have changed and certain ideologies have been thrust down your throats through generations, which has managed to transform society into what it is today, a very skeptical people when it comes to religious matters. The Bible is not just a book of science. The Bible is also a book of salvation, and the Bible is also a book of prophecy. And the Bible tells us that we should study prophecy because it will convince us that there is a God in heaven and that he has history under control. So study prophecy, rediscover God, and then you will rediscover God in creation. And you look at that which reminds us of the original, and that which takes the mind away from the original, you can see as a consequence of a changed environment, as a consequence of something called sin. And sin creates pain and tears and suffering. And therefore the Bible says the new world will have none of those. And therefore this is not just some vague promise. This is an absolute fulfillment of the culmination of all history. It will return to the original. You can be part of it by your choice, or you could miss the boat by your choice. The choice is really yours.
All right, dear audience, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future discussions. And if you want to support the channel, consider sharing this video with friends or checking out our other content. And you have a bill in the description if you want to donate. So, Dr. Walter Veith, thank you for your time. And thanks everyone for watching NT Podcast. See you in next episode.
God bless you all. Take care. Bye.